Greetings, everyone. It's a pleasure to be taking part in this re-evolutionary regional conference. As you know, my name is Lucía Moar, and I am representing Alianza Cultural Uruguay-Estados Unidos. I've been teaching English for over 15 years now, but this is my first one teaching online classes synchronically. I'd like to start by telling you a little bit about my own context first, all right? So both my husband and I have been working from home ever since the outbreak of COVID-19 in March in Uruguay, right? With our 2-year-old son, as you can see here, that's Amin, and that's my husband, Simon, at home 24/7. So I can assure you that this experience has tested our patience to the limit. And I'm sure you can all relate to that one way or another, right? All of us with different, family context and different situations, all living through these pandemic times. So personally, I've always loved the use of tech in my classes. So when I learned that due to the current pandemic, we all had the opportunity to work from home, teaching classes through video calls, I was excited and a bit scared. I clearly remember at that moment, a question popped up to my head, and that question was, how are we going to teach online classes that don't lack any of the elements of our face-to-face ones? And ever since, that has been my goal, and I've been trying to achieve it and survive in the process. So in this journey of trying to discover different ways to keep the same elements of our face-to-face classes, another question popped up, and that was, what are some aspects that can make my students' experience unique, worthwhile, and engaging, all at the same time? So I tried different tools, different resources, different materials in order to see how this could be worked out in this virtual environment. And after my fair share of trial and error, I have finally decided that my personal ultimate class kit was going to include the following games. I'm going to explain the following tools, and I'm going to explain to you briefly. So first of all, the one that I'm going to talk about is Quizlet Live. I'm sure that many of you have already heard about it, and you can find some reference to it in the handouts that I'm sharing with you about my presentation. So mainly the idea of Quizlet is that it is excellent, a great resource for teamwork, and especially when you are trying to teach your students vocabulary, right? So the way it works is, as you can see here in the picture. So all of your students need to enter the game. You're going to send them a link. And the way it works is that after they access, all of the names are going to appear in the screen. And later on, when you create the game, they're going to go automatically to different groups. So what I've done was to make different groups. In my case, in Alianza, what we use to teach a video, classes through video calls is Google Meet. And what I did was to create different Google Meets so that they could access and work in different groups, right? So the main point of Quizlet Live is the following one. So you create a game, they access the different groups, and then all of them are going to see, for example, in one group, all of them are going to see the same question on top. Now it's going to pop up. They can connect using the cell phone, they can connect using the computer, a tablet, whatever device they're working with. So what happens is that the questions appear to all of them, the same ones, but the answers have been distributed depending on the number of students that are part of that group. So, for example, as you can see here in action, Quizlet in action, this was my one of my groups. Actually, with their permission, I'm sharing here with you the experience. As you can see, they're having lots of fun. So what they have to do is they need to have all their microphones unmuted, because after they see the question, they say, they communicate to one another and say, ah, yes, I have it. Oh, no, I don't have it. So, oh, I think it's this one. So they read it, and if it's correct, as you can see here, it's going to become green, and it's going to disappear from the screen. So you can learn more about this if you want, and if you're interested, in the tutorial that I've attached, all right, to the handouts. And well, what you see as the teacher is how each group is progressing. And when there's a mistake, they start from zero again. So it's real fun. Usually when we play 3 rounds. So the best out of 3 is what we do. All right, so the second tool I want to present to you today is Quizlet as well, but in this case it's Quizlet Learn. So the way I use it is the following one. During the class, while students are working in groups, or even when we are having a general class discussion, there's always a word that they don't know, that they ask how to say this, how to say the other thing, or well, there's something that they read or that they listen to in an activity and they don't know the meaning of that word. So what I do is I pay close attention to what they are saying in the different conversations, and I take notes. So while they are working in groups, I create very, very quickly a Quizlet set with all these expressions, definitions, and in some cases, some pictures, if I can find some cool ones. And after they are done, we play Quizlet Learn. So the idea is that a question appears, and you can choose it to be a multiple choice kind of question. So, for example, the definition appears, and they have 4 possible answers, and they have to realize, okay, which one they have to consult all together, everybody unmuting their microphones, which is the best option in order to match that definition, right? It's real fun, and it helps them a lot to reinforce the vocabulary that they've learned that class. All right. This is an example of how Quizlet Learn works. So as you can see, here appears a definition, and here appears a picture, and students have 4 different options to choose from, right? So physically and mentally fatigued. So guys, what do you think this is? So they could tell me any of these options. So let's say they say, oh, teacher, that's spraying. Do you all agree? Yes. All right, let's take a look. Oh, it seems that I wasn't the right one. Okay, the right one was wary. Okay, so next time we see it, we'll know what it means. So how about this one? To push or pull an object over another. I believe that's scrapped. This is the right one. Yes, that's very good. Okay, well, this one we believe is we're out. And well, this one might be to go out with. And then at some point, the other term will appear again. So students can recognize it and get back to it, right? Okay, so physically and mentally fatigued, guys, remember we saw this earlier. Yes, it's wary. Okay, so this is an example of how it works. And the third tool that I want to show you here today is Spotted, a card game. So these cards have different icons, different pictures, small images. So what I've done with my student is mainly to use it as a filler, as a class filler, or for playing in teams. So one team versus the other, let's say, or all together. So what I do is I show to them 2 pictures, like the ones you see here, 2 cards, and they have to find out, spot which is the icon in common. And the first who can spot it, it's the one that gets the point. So I just put it aside, and on this side, it's the pile of one team. On this other side is the pile of the other team. And all right, that's the way we play, and they have lots of fun, really. Well, one pro is that, that you have lots of fun, but one cons is actually that you actually need to have the game physically in order to play it, right? So, I mean, you as a teacher, your students don't need to, because you show it to them, and of course, by that interaction is all right. They can see it and clearly with the camera, and they can spot the different icons. I've tried it, and it has worked really well. Well, the fourth tool I want to show you is Genially infographics and presentations. The one I'm using right now is one of them. And well, what I'd like to tell you about this at this point is simply that it's a way to create interactive content for your students, and not only for class, but also for different information that your students might have to access, along the year. So it's really practical. You can share it easily with a link, and they can have access to that anytime that's needed. Later, we'll see some more examples of how I've used it in my classes. Well, the next and fifth tool I'd like to present to you here is Get Bad News. So Get Bad News is a game that was created by the University of Cambridge. And the main point of the game is, do you want to become a fake news tycoon? You want to become an expert creating fake news? So this game, it's choose your own adventure kind of game, and it always gives you two options to choose from. So the main point is, so would you like to tweet this information, or do you prefer to tweet this other information? And the better you choose the info that will manipulate the minds of the people, the more followers you start to get. So on the one hand, you learn how to manipulate others to believe the information you publish, even though you know it's fake. And on the other hand, it prevents you from believing this kind of fake information that we come across so often on a daily basis, right? So I truly recommend it. They have the one that I played was for adults and young adults, but doing some research on the website, they also have versions for kids and young teenagers. So you could give it a try. And I've also seen that it's in different languages, so it could be a really nice and fun game to play. So here's how the game works. So you just click here on play the game and you get started. So hi there, good to see you. Hey, you're here for the position of disinformation and fake news tycoon. Is that correct? That's right. So you're probably frustrated about something, right? Aren't we all? You can get started by using Twitter to vent. Okay, let's post a frustrated tweet. This government is a complete and utter failure. Hashtag resign. Losers. All right. So I'm not angry enough about the government or tweet this. So what's going to be your next move? So if we click on tweet this, what's going to happen is that this is going to be tweeted, of course, internally in the game. And we're going to start getting some followers. Okay, a start is a start. What do I do next? So there's always going to appear something here in this part, a message, and you will have to choose from this option here or this option here. Your followers are going to be found here, and your credibility level is going to be here. This was just an example of how the game works. Well, the next tool that I want to share, and the sixth one in my list, is one-to-one Pictionary. So this has been real fun. It's simple. What you need is just to have your notepad with you, and students need to have the notepad, and they just have to, draw something. You give them a minute or more or less, depending on the difficulty of the vocabulary. And this serves really well for as a warm up or as a closure of the class. So in order to review vocabulary from the previous class, or from to round up this one. So this one was, for example, one of the words in my case that I had to draw. Okay, and here in the picture you can see my students in action. So the interesting part of this is that after they show their cards, their pictures, their partners have to take turns guessing what is the word or the expression that they were trying to explain there.
The seventh tool that has been really helpful in my classes are brain breaks. I'm not going to go too deep into it because you can find you can have reference to this in my handouts. But I would like to tell you just briefly about one experience we had. So we were all getting very tired in class, and I knew it was time for a brain break. So I told my students, okay, everyone who please stand up, please sit down, please jump, please look out the window. So different actions that they had to do if they were wearing, for example, jeans, or if they had short hair, or if different characteristics. And I also invited them to do the same. So at some point, they were also participating and inventing these phrases. And at the end of the brain break, many of them commented that they felt really good participating, because it was not only as a passive, let's say, participant in just receiving commands in a way, but also participating in an active way, proposing different questions and things like that. It was really interesting for them.
The eighth and ninth tool that I want to share with you is quizzes and Kahoot challenge. So quizzes is a kind of game that it's similar to Kahoot, but the difference is that the questions and the answers appear directly on the device your students are using. So they don't have to look at a screen and then choose the answers directly from, choose the answers from the cell phone, but read the questions from another source. So it's been really good, and I've used the challenges a lot so that they have certain time to do it, and then they do it, and from there you can see which answers were a bit weaker. So then you can go over those questions and review them, or look for different ways to help your students understand those points, right? And with the challenge, the Kahoot challenge, here you have my students again in action with this. So I had started directly playing Kahoot, but one student of mine said, "Oh, teacher, I'm using my cell phone and I cannot look at our meeting and at the same time look at my cell phone in order to answer the questions quickly." So it was not so fair for her, right? In this case. So I said to myself, okay, so what's the big deal? So let's change to a Kahoot challenge and let's go with it instead. So what I did was I shared the link, as you see here. I copied the URL and shared it with the students. They were divided into groups, and just one person from the group volunteered to share screens in the different calls, and they played all together in groups like that. It had the same outcome, and it was just on the spot change that I needed to make, right? So that's something really important, right? So do not feel frustrated if something you plan doesn't go along the way you wanted it to go. You just have to be ready to let go.
This is what you'll see as a teacher when your students are playing quizzes challenge. So in this case, you see how they start to complete their answers, and then you can see the questions, how the accuracy is going. You can sort them out, and you can see which questions you might need to review after everybody's finished. Then you see the podium, who finished first, second, third, and you're going to see which areas they did best at, and what was the percentage, the total percentage of accuracy of the class, right? So later, if you want to analyze the questions with your students, you can go ahead, sort them by accuracy, and you will see that, well, in this case, there were 3 questions, all of them were accurate at. So what I did, I wanted to analyze these questions. They had some doubts about it. So you just click on the question and it shows you the accuracy. In this case, 75% of them answered it correctly. If this was classified as the toughest question. So this is an example of how, as a teacher, you can see how the quizzes challenge works.
Okay, and finally, the 10th tool has to do with Google Tools, actually. So the calendar, the Jamboard, and the Drive. So I use them a lot in my classes on a daily basis. So I'm going to show you how a fusion of some of these tools that I've just shared with you, my very personal Ultimate Class Kit, has helped me mainly reshape my classes in 3 different ways: how to organize the information I share with my students, how to plan a class led by my students' decisions with my presence there, but without my constant interruption or instruction, And last but not least, how to prepare class contents that stand the test of time and students can get back to anytime they need to. So how about we get started with the first one? So how to organize the information I share with my students in a neat and clear way. All right. So here what I'd like to show you is a combination of the use of the Jamboard and also the Google Calendar, the Drive, Quizlet, and well, some of the other tools that you saw there before in my list. So the Google Jamboard, it's a Google tool that we can use as a whiteboard, for example. I know some of us teachers like to have our whiteboards neat. So on one side, we tend to write the vocabulary. On the other side, we tend to write some gambits, for example, for the speaking activities. And in the middle, we usually include the class content that we want to teach or we want our students to focus on. So in this case, what I do is this is on the spot content. So whenever a word, like we're having a conversation and a word comes up that they don't know, or some phrase needs to be clear to them, the way to say it. So we use the Jamboard for that as well. So this was one example I wanted to share with you. And then the other one is this one that I've chosen. As you can see, it is a puzzle and it is an interactive puzzle. So I've added this at the top of the platform that I use with my students. So in Alianza, the platform we use for all our courses is Moodle, now 3.9, and it allows you to embed different content that you want. So in this case, I wanted my students to have all the content of the course that was essential for them in just one place, so that they didn't have to go look for it elsewhere and maybe not find it right so easily. You know that all of our students are not so tech savvy. So I want to show you a little bit of how it works. So as I mentioned earlier about the calendar, I decided to do the following. For every course that I have, I create a Google Calendar. And what I do there is I use that Google Calendar to plan. So for example, I put mainly, very briefly, what the topics are that I want to cover. So in the past, I used to count the number of classes that I had to teach certain units, and I would write here on paper, okay, so I will devote this number of days to talk about this unit, this other number to talk about this other thing. But then I would never go back to it. I even tried to do spreadsheets and Word, Google Docs and very elaborated ones, very detailed. But then they were not really practical for me, in my experience. So I decided this was going to be my new way of planning my courses. I create the calendar, I write what mainly I'm going to be teaching my students. They can know it in advance, and it's great for them because it can help them focus on what the objectives of the class are. And then later, what we did becomes the class summary. So if students are absent or they just want to review what happened in the previous class, or they want to go back to certain links that were shared that class, everything is going to be here for them. Well, something else that I wanted to share with you is, for instance, we have different class calls, right? So different meetings during the class. So I thought it was important that my students had access to that, and since they have to do it on a daily basis, I found this really cool infographic. Of course, I edited it and personalized it, customized it, and to make it suit my students' needs. Well, then something else, well, of course, Genially lets you create very beautiful infographics that are aesthetic and really user-friendly and call people's attention. So also, since it's interactive, it's another way that students can have access to the content. They can interact with it. I mean, for me, it's fun And for them, it has been very practical and useful. So for instance, in this case, the idea was to know more information about a certain exam, and it's the first certificate that students need to take. So something to call their attention. This is moving, so it must have something interesting. Well, and then one more point I wanted to share with you here is that, well, for instance, you can share links directly here, and you can link them to the drive, for instance. In this case, the idea was to have speaking practice, so they can find the practice in certain pages, but sometimes students have to play the role of examiners, no? So they have direct info on what type of questions the examiner could ask and like that. And also, it lets you embed other infographics within these infographics. So you can embed and link anything that's embeddable and anything that is linkable, let's say, to put it somehow. So here's an example of how I did it. Okay, as I said before, so these are some examples of how to organize the information I share with my students in a neat and clear way. So the second topic, the second aspect that these tools have helped me reshape in my classes is how to plan a class led by my students' decisions, letting them interact with each other, but without my constant instructions and interruption there, with me listening. It's fun because they call me Big Brother because I'm everywhere. And when they have a question, I just pop up and say the answer in the chat or here, there. It's real fun. Okay, but anyways, the idea is not to interrupt, right? All right, so here's the first example. The main point of this, of creating this, was to give them an opportunity to review in a fun way to get ready for a test. Now, so I chose different topics that they needed to work with, they needed to review. And I chose this picture because it's, well, famous, everybody knows it, and it's relatable. And then what I did was I contextualized each of the icons, relating them to the person, to the actor, to the roles these people have played. So for instance, here, this is Angelina Jolie. And the idea was, I'm sure you remember Angelina Jolie for her roles in some action movies. In order to be ready for her roles, she had to work out really hard. Talking about exercise, let's go to page da-da-da and do this exercise. You'll learn many sport-related expressions. All right, so the idea was to contextualize related to, well, what that person does and how's that related to the exercise we are doing. It was really good to do that. In case of, well, you probably know him from House of Cards. His name is Kevin Spacey, and many of the movies he's been part of involve crime. So as you can see here, there are different pictures that are related to vocabulary. And also you have a list here and also some definitions that they had to match. So it was practical to do it this way. And well, all in all, the idea, or the main idea is, first, choose what you want your students to work with. Second, try to make it varied so that it's not different topics, not varied in the sense of different topics, varied in the sense of different type of activities, like work with the book, work with this link, watch this video and discuss about it, listen to this recording and report it. Different types of activities that you can think of, it will really help to enrich this type of activities. So how is this connected to the fact that students were working on their own without my constant interruption? Well, they were working in groups, and the idea was that they actually had to choose what they wanted to do. So I told them, all right, guys, so now you have 30 minutes. So what icons would you like to work with? You advance as much as you can, and then in another opportunity, you can get back to it and continue working with the rest of the activities that you choose. So it was really useful, and students had lots of fun with it. Okay, so moving on to the other example I wanted to share with you. In this case, it's not an infographic. It is a presentation per se. And what I did was I told my students what the class objectives were at the beginning, and they knew that we were going to work that class on on a speaking section, listening skills, and also to reviewing some vocabulary and grammar structures that we've been working with lately. So they could simply keep going and keep clicking here, there, now in order to have the warm up, to discuss here, there, these questions, and continue getting started with the speaking section, just like that. Or if they wanted, what they could do was to come here directly and choose which were the slides they wanted to pay a look at now and go directly to what they wanted. So for instance, if they simply wanted to play and start the class playing, so they could come here and pay a look at these games that I had embedded to the presentation. So for instance, if we pay a look at the vocabulary exercise, so I connected quizzes here together with this game, with this presentation, sorry. And here's an example of one of the questions. So many young people are forced to for themselves. So look for themselves, rely, feed, fend for themselves. Let's go with look. Oh no, that was not the right answer. Oh, try a new question. Okay, so the idea was that students can keep going, right? So playing laser tag is a good way to let off. Well, I'm gonna go with steam. Let's see. Okay, that's the right one. Okay, we're getting better at this. So you look out after all that hard work. So you probably look worn out. All right. So the idea then is that it's very motivating to students, right? To keep going, to have pictures there, some gifts, maybe they can relate to, you know. So in this case, I tried to connect the different situations to TV shows and, well, etc., etc. All right. So another cool thing that you can do here, if we go back to a previous slide. So then imagine after you play the game, you want to work with speaking section, okay? So here you have the different characteristics of the different stages. So you click here and you can see more information, some tips. You also can link the different buttons that you see here to other slides of the presentation. So students can, let's say, it's user friendly in that sense, because students can go anywhere they want. So for instance, for stage 2, if they didn't know how to do that, so how can I organize my presentation better? That's a good question. Okay, so here I can have some connectors, some points to introduce info. Fantastic. Okay, and like that, many other of the points here that you can see. All right, so then if we continue.
Now you need to further.
If we continue the presentation, so you can, students can interact by clicking here and there and access different info. So for instance, they can go back to certain tips before they do their practice of the
Now
section.
you need to.
You can include your own voice giving some explanation or instructions about this stage, and you can also embed some listening activities, and you can continue. Well, students can listen from here directly what they wanted to do, so they just click and they be able to listen what you share with them, right? Okay, so you can keep going.
Now for stage 4, you need
to the different stages, and you will continue finding different tips, different instructions.
Now for stage.
All right, and well, remember the other objective was to work with listening. Also, they could come here directly and just listen to the audio and answer the questions on a certain page, right? And if time allowed it, well, they had an extra activity there for them to work with. This is it regarding this presentation I wanted to share with you, and also the previous infographic, in order to to plan a class led by your students' decisions, right? Like a choose your own adventure kind of activity. Okay, so finally, the final point that I want to share with you today is how to prepare class content that stand the test of time and students can get back to anytime. All right, so here I have two main examples I want to share with you about two main experiences. The first example has to do with how to write an opinion essay. So they have to write opinion essays quite often for this course in particular. So they needed to have at hand how to plan it, what to consider when doing so, what were some useful expressions for an essay, for an opinion essay, and also how to, well, write introductions, what are some key sentences they have to include, also how the body should be organized, and how about the conclusion, what would be a good way, and also, well, for them to have a checklist of, if in order to make sure that they had included everything they needed, and at the same time an example for them to see, okay, so this is one of ideal one that had a high pass result, so let's see how to do that, right? So the main point was that every time they had to write an opinion essay, they could come here and pay a direct look at this Jamboard.
When we are teaching writing to our students, it's crucial that they can access visually what information they need to consider when writing one, right? Especially an opinion essay. So this way, it was more practical for my students and at the same time user-friendly. If they were on the bus going back home or at a cafe and they wanted to start working with their essay, they could simply access it directly from their phones and they could have it there.
All right, so it's very practical for students to use the Jamboards, also not only for as a digital whiteboard, but also for class content they can get back to, right? Especially for writing and speaking, it's a really good tool. And the last two examples I would like to share with you today are these ones. They are also connected to teaching writing. And in this case, I chose this infographic in order to review with my students
how we should write an opinion essay.
So how to write an effective introduction. Okay, so the objective of the essay introduction is to present the topic you're going to develop and to provide your opinion about it. And well, different questions that could help my students, right? So how is the intro structured? So that's the way it should be structured, using the funnel technique. Well, different questions that could help them understand what to expect or what is expected from them when they are writing an introduction, right? So what is there anything that they should avoid? Yes. What shouldn't we do in an introduction? Okay, so here you have all the different things that students should avoid. Of course, you can include as many things as you want. So the point is to make it look attractive to students so that students can interact with the content and not just read it. Of course, there's nothing wrong with a Google document if that's the time you have. If the time you have is just for creating that, and it's all right. So whenever I have more time, I'd like to prepare material that looks more appealing to the eye. So mainly that. And last but not least, then we were working with writing letters. So the idea was to teach my students, okay, how to write a letter. So I said, okay, how about we'll learn from the experts? So here you have instructions that said touch the images for inspiration. So if they touch the images, they could see some very interesting quotes to get inspired somehow. And also touch the icons to learn about how to write a letter. My personal favorite here is this one, George Lucas. You probably know him for, he's the writer of Star Wars, a creator. So if we click here, are you part of the light side or dark side of writing? So welcome to the light side. To remain on the light side, this is what you have to do. Organize your letter, do this, do that, stay on topic, etc. So again, contextualization is key, and it's really practical for your students, and in my experience, more engaging for them if we do that. All right, and the other case was, okay, how can I avoid the dark side? So to avoid being on the dark side, you must, and well, different things that you must do, like for example, follow good practices. Let's take a look at here. So, okay, so here we have some examples with some comments of some things they should do. For example, for an A, if you want to get an A, if you want to get a B, if you want to get a C, you know, so some based on some real cases, some real examples. Well, also, for example, how is the what type of letters should I expect to write, with some more information there, etc., etc. So those ideas were to show you how to prepare class contents that stand the test of time and students can get back to anytime. All these tools that I shared with you.
This is just a list of tools, right? Tools that have worked for me.
And aren't tools only powerful if used in the right context for the right reasons? Well, if you look closer, most of these apps promote interactive communication. And that is what I believe our virtual classes should aim at. In fact, the ultimate goal in using them is to create an experience that helps us interact with one another in the closest way possible to what we were used to face. Of course, it will never replace human contact, ever. But in my experience, until now, in my very personal experience, it is as close as it can get, right? Involving more interactivity in the virtual classroom. I actually watched a webinar some days ago called Education Deserves to be Interactive. It was really, really interesting. Well, it was from the company, from Genially, that they were promoting the product and that. But anyways, it was really good, and it lingered, no? I kept thinking about it. So before I round this up, I'd actually like to share with you that none of these ideas would have worked for my students and I if it hadn't been for the rapport built with them, with a touch of humor and heart, plus the foundation I promote in my classes, which is that our class is a learning environment and mistakes are welcome. So to sum up this presentation, as teachers in this ever-changing world, we must adapt. And for that, we need to be open to learning. As the American author Zig Ziglar once said, if you are not willing to learn, no one can help you. If you are determined to learn, no one can stop you. So I hope these special times inspire us all to be humble, be teachable, and always keep learning. So in a nutshell, this has been what I've learned from this experience of teaching from home about the interactivity in the virtual classroom and beyond. So thank you very much for being such an amazing audience and for staying with me till the end. So if you have any questions, right now would be the best moment to ask them and to exchange some ideas about what I just shared with you. Thank you very much.